I'm Michael. Welcome to Beyond the Screenplay, the podcast where each episode we do a conversational deep dive analysis into a film. Today we are talking about Sicario, the 2015 film written by Taylor Sheridan, directed by Denis Villeneuve. I'm joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Rand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hola, hola.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
All right, so we are in week 2 of our Wicked winter season. Last week, we released episodes on Wicked and The Wizard of Oz, both back-to-back. Wicked on the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon, Wizard of Oz publicly. That was a lot of fun. Brian just showed us the thumbnail of that as we're recording, and it was I'm still shook by it. Anyway, but so did that last week. Next week, we're going to be talking about Challengers, the perfect Valentine's Day film.
Yes.
Alex is very excited about. But today we're talking about Sicario. Very different vibe from either of those two sides of things. So I remember seeing this movie in the theater and kind of leaving sort of like, not quite underwhelmed, but sort of like, I think I liked it, but like, and it kind of stayed with me, but then I also didn't think about it for a long time. And it's interesting looking back at the filmography of Denis Villeneuve, because I think I thought this was later, but this is pre-Arrival even. Mm-hmm. And so like on Sunday, Alex dragged us to go see. We've talked about that before. Prisoners.
It's a great movie.
Prisoners I had seen and remember thinking it was pretty and have then wiped from my memory everything about it. And I'm okay with that, I think. Enemy, I remember seeing and liking, but being like, this is weird. And so reminding myself that that was kind of the place that I was coming from. This is maybe like the most normal Denis Villeneuve movie in some ways. And like it's the kind of movie that I think is you wouldn't expect to be from the same director as like Dune, because it's so like terrestrial. It takes place in a very like specific time and place and the subject matter. Anyway, it was interesting revisiting it, and I think it's become one of my favorite of his films. Like maybe second only to Arrival at this point. I'm still trying to figure it out, but there's something in this movie where plot-wise, there's not a ton going on. It's pretty simple. And I think there's a really bad version of this movie. Like there's a Michael Bay version of this movie that's an action movie and is just like extremely offensive out there somewhere. And I'm glad we never have to think about that. But I feel like...
I mean, is that what the sequel is? Because I never bothered.
Nor did I.
It got like decent reviews and people said it was good.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I saw the opposite.
Mixed.
Yeah.
Mixed then. Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like this movie is really fascinating because it's, I think, a movie that, like I said, could have been done terribly, but was done by Roger Deakins and Denis Villeneuve and with this cast and just like elevated to its maximum. And there's even something about the Denis Villeneuve like filmmaking style that is kind of like a little slow and a little somber and kind of still, that I feel like matches the sort of thematic explorations in this movie for me more than some of his other ones. So anyway, I find this movie really fascinating and I've really enjoyed revisiting it, and I'm really curious to talk to you guys about it. Alex, what do you make of this movie?
Yeah, because I feel like I'm the biggest Denis Villeneuve fanboy of the four of us. And yes, I was there at the beginning. I saw On Sunday at Sundance, and I was like, "Who is this man?" But yeah, no, I followed his filmography from the beginning, and I loved Prisoners, even though it's a deeply disturbing, horrific movie. Beautifully made, beautiful music, beautiful cinematography, great acting, and just seeing Prisoners after On Sunday kind of solidified like this is the one to watch right now. This guy is doing something special. He's really a master of the craft. And so I was already sold on him. And then we saw, Sicario. I probably was there with you, Michael, at ArcLight or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, ArcLight Hollywood back in the day.
Good old days.
Yeah. And I also walked out of the movie with a similar sensation that you described, where it's just like, okay, I think that was good and I liked it, but it didn't give me kind of a satisfaction, maybe intentionally. There was a disorientation to the movie of, who's the protagonist and where did we end up and why was that the ending? And so it was definitely, it left me unsettled, I think in an intentional way, but it didn't leave me with enough to like think about it for days afterwards and keep coming back to it. So it hit some weird middle ground where it didn't become one of my favorite of his, and I didn't really think about it much like you. And it was cool to revisit it. And it's interesting seeing it now after seeing some like latter day Taylor Sheridan productions. Because he's become this brand, almost like you think of like Shonda Rhimes with ABC, like Taylor Sheridan's just pumping out content for Paramount Plus now, like too much content. And it's so interesting to see like what he's making now, like shows like Lioness, where you've got these, kind of similar CIA kind of stories and the same kind of archetypes coming back. But this is like an earlier origin of all those interests filtered through, as you were saying, Michael, these like master filmmakers, Roger Deakins, Denis Villeneuve, this great cast of characters. So it's an interesting movie to revisit now because we've seen a lot more from Denis Villeneuve. He's gone into the blockbuster territory. He had never done that before at this point with Sicario. And I did see, you mentioned Michael, I would never imagine this guy doing like Dune or the Dune guy doing this movie. But I saw a lot of origins of Dune in this movie. The way he shot Arizona and Texas and the border, very much like Arrakis, with the same kind of dread and the helicopter shots and all that stuff. So there was a really interesting thing of like, oh wait, you were like practicing for Dune kind of with the way you shot the desert here. So all that is to say, it still kind of sits lower in the tier for me of the Denis Villeneuve filmography, but I liked it a lot more this time, and it interested me a lot more, and I found more to kind of think about afterwards than in my first viewing. So excited to talk about it.
Yeah, cool. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, kind of similar in the sort of not sure how I felt kind of thing. Also, I'd probably seen Prisoners at this point, but that was it. So I didn't know Denis Villeneuve was a person, really. I definitely didn't know Taylor Sheridan was a person. And when I realized he wrote that, I was like, they made a movie together? That seems insane. And as you talked about, Alex, like the filmmaking is interesting because it feels like it's from Arrival on. Denis Villeneuve's like, I make big sweeping sci-fi movies now, but it's like, oh yeah, but you also used to make kind of dramas that were just shot like dramas some of the time, and then we're like, look at me, and I'm going to be big and directory and showy, but at the right moments and not all the time, like a Chris Nolan who's like always kind of being like, look at this shot, like look, we're going to do the, like, I was surprised watching this movie that was just like, oh yeah, it's just kind of like very toned down, except when it decides like now's this big sequence where we're going to get big. But yeah, in my memory, this movie was like this, woman at the center of this male-driven profession, and then she's kind of being like compassionate and thoughtful while they're being sort of brute force and being like, now we do things this way, not like the right way or whatever. And then the movie was like, wouldn't it be cool if she wasn't in it anymore? And then we just put a dude as the protagonist for the rest of the movie. And I was like, no, because then that's just every other movie, right? And then so that was for the last decade, like my impression of this movie. Watching it again, like the Benicio sequence is like 10 minutes. That's it. Like
so much shorter
really,
than I remembered it.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But we'll get into it because obviously it's not about how long it is. It's about the fact that the movie very purposefully pulls her triumphant finale out from under your feet, right? And I kind of like this time around just being like, oh yeah, of course we're doing a Zodiac, No Country for Old Men thing where it's like my frustration is baked into the themes of the movie. I'm sure I got that to some extent when I saw it the first time, but my frustration sort of outweighed my appreciation of it. But definitely knowing how it's handled this time, I was able to really appreciate it. And I also was like, I remember so much about this movie. It was like every time something was about to happen, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to happen. And I was like, that's a good sign of a movie that I saw once at home 10 years ago. And now I'm just going like, oh yeah, like this thing is going to happen. I remember this. I like this moment is baked into my brain. So yeah, really, I think I want to get into kind of the POV of it all. I think there's an unevenness, I think, that kind of makes the Benicio sequence throw me off a little bit. But I do think there are a lot of interesting choices here that kind of make the movie be what it is and not just feel like a sort of cookie cutter, this kind of movie. So all in all, really enjoyed it this time around, and things that I didn't appreciate before, I'm appreciating now.
Yeah, same. Cool. Trisha, what about you?
Thank you guys for making me watch this movie. I had not seen it before because I saw that it was rated R for language, strong violence, and grisly images. So I was like, that doesn't sound like it's for me. But and then the movie really front loads those things. So I was like, initially I was like, oh, is this what the movie is? I hope not. And it's not what the movie is, but there's, most of the time, the vast majority of the runtime, it's just like a really tense thriller, which is great, and then there's these bursts of action and these bursts of violence, and some really well done sequences, which I really appreciated. But yeah, this movie is cool. It it has so much confidence, from, a debut screenwriter, like a director still before really hitting the stride of his big budget career, making a lot of what there is here now, and not by no stretch a low budget movie, but still a really impressive showing, I think. And I just really I'm at the phase of my life where I tend to watch movies 30 to 40 minutes at a time over 2 or 3 nights, because I'm tired. And I was very tired sitting down to watch Sicario and thinking I was only going to watch a little bit of it, but I'll be damned if I watch the whole thing. I just watched the whole thing. It was great. I had a great experience watching it. I'm excited to pull it apart with you guys. I think it's a really cool movie and one I definitely want to go back and watch more. Yeah. Brian, it was probably you that hinted
The number of times I've heard someone say
the sentence starts with
and it's never happy.
I'm sure you've hinted on the podcast before what basically the exact thing that you just said, which was this is a movie that pulls a protagonist switcheroo, essentially. And so for some reason, I went in with the preparation that this was going to be Psycho. And I was like, I think Emily Blunt's I think she's going to die. And so when she's on the floor in her own apartment and she's getting choked out by what's-his-face, I was like, this is it. I was so sure that she was gone. And then she makes it through that. And I'm like, well, now it's getting later and later for a switcheroo on the protagonist. I was really expecting her to be dead by now. But somebody just had set me up incorrectly for this film. I mean, not all the way incorrectly, but kind of. So, I mean, that just goes to show, don't listen to everything you hear Brian say.
Well, as Brian was alluding to, I think something about, because that last sequence is so disconcerting, where Emily Blunt just disappears from the story and we are just now with Alejandro going into Mexico, I think in our minds from that initial viewing, it feels longer or feels like a bigger deal than it actually is in the runtime. So we can talk about that. But I think I also had the idea in my head of Emily Blunt just gets taken out of the movie at some point. But it's like the final, I
mean, she's just sitting there in a ditch talking to Josh Brolin, but she's still there. Right. I think it cuts to her here and there, or at least after she gets hit in the vest. She does go back, talk to Josh Brolin. It's what's going on? What's the real mission? She kind of gets the explanation. She's still there.
Well, then it's a 10-minute stretch without her.
Sure, but it's not like we don't know where she is.
Well, I think it has more to do with the fact that we're waiting for her triumphant finale, and the gods of theme are going, she doesn't get to have it, right? And that's the thing that makes it feel so much weightier, I think, in our memories.
Yeah, I think it's like a social experiment here of because the arc we expected for the protagonist, as we would expect in this kind of a movie, did not conclude. we have this false memory of like they just like took her out of the movie at some point because like there's an empty gap there,
Right.
where our story brains are trying to fill that
But
didn't
she still
exist.
gets the final climactic choice, like whether or not to kill him from the balcony. Let's talk
Sure,
about
let's
it.
talk about
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Here we are.
And it's, you know, and there's something about the ending and the whole movie that does feel No Country to me, all the way from the Roger Deakins of it all,
Yeah,
the Josh
yeah.
Brolin of it all,
Mm-hmm.
the setting, but also even the ending does it, even though it has more of a classical final choice, it's still not satisfying in a way. I don't know. To me, it's hard to know what the final choice means for her and for the theme and everything. So yeah, let's talk about all of it.
Yeah. Skip to the end. Yeah, I mean, so I think this time, partially because I was able to follow the story better this time. I do remember the first time being a little bit lost plot-wise.
It's pretty convoluted.
Yeah. And so I was like never 100% sure of what anybody was doing at any given time in terms of the specifics. So I think I was distracted by the plot stuff, and I was just like younger and less like, you know, less of a sophisticated movie watcher than I am today because of all of us. But this time, I really liked that final scene with Emily Blunt and Benicio del Toro. I understood like what it meant. Like I understood her journey of like there's a right way to do things and this is the wrong way, and she's fighting for that tooth and nail to the end, trying to not be corrupted. And it's in that final choice that she's like kind of begrudgingly and frustratingly being like, this is more like complex than I want it to be. And it's not as simple as I just like get to kill the bad guy at the end.
Right.
And it got me. Like that whole movie is setting that up, and just the mood and the tone and like the dread that you're feeling is the sort of like, man, the world is really gray and complex, and we are dealing in a thematic space here where it's just like, what is the lesser of the two evils? Mm-hmm. And I think that's in the plot, but so much of it is in the filmmaking and the performances that make you really feel that. And then it is crystallized in that final scene. And yeah, the performances are just great. Benicio del Toro in every scene. It's just like, I just want to watch him do as little as possible, but it's amazing. Every tiny little thing he does, like it's so understated, but there's so much like soul and history, like in his eyes and in the way he carries himself, that all of the characters are like that. And so there's this deep depth that you're kind of getting a small window into that I think makes it feel so much more powerful than when these simple plot things like her deciding not to shoot happen.
And it's set up, to your point, Michael, it's set up from the very beginning where the opening sequence where they go and raid that house and then they find not just some bad guys, but like a great evil, right? They literally uncover a great evil, you know? And the movie starts us off with a really clean expectation of right and wrong, which is the same one that Emily Blunt has, right? Which like, these guys are here, they're good guys. And then like, and everyone's doing everything by the book, right? Like Emily Blunt has to shoot somebody, but he was firing at her already. So we're just like, whew, okay, good. She got the bad guy here. Like it's all very neat and easy. And then two of her agents get blown up and like, there's all these bodies, there's all this stuff. And so we're just like, yeah, go get the bad guys, go get them. The bad guys are very clean. We know who they are. Like we understand that they are evil. And then it starts to like introduce these complications. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that withholds information quite as much or quite as long. We have almost no expository information on who anybody is, like what's really going on. They're like, you're going to go to El Paso and we're going to like check on something. And you're like, okay, like the brother of somebody, whatever. He's in the El Paso area. And that's like literally all anybody tells her. And then the next thing we know, we're going to Mexico. And then the next thing we know, we're in this thing. And like, nobody's telling anybody anything. Benicio del Toro gets on the plane. He's asleep. He looks scary even when he's sleeping. What's going on? Like, it's just like, I don't know. it so quickly goes from like, here's a crystal clear right and wrong, like bad guys, good guys, to just like, I'm lost and I don't know what anything is anymore. And then it erodes it and erodes it more and more as the movie goes on. Until they're like, yeah, you know, you get to the scene where they almost kill her, or the assassin almost kills her. And she's like, you guys used me as bait. But even that is not enough for her to like get off the ride, right? It's just still like there's nothing at some point that she won't do just to find out what the truth is. And the truth is so much worse than she could have ever expected, right?
Yeah. Just a couple things I want to call out in that opening that you were talking about that are in the script and in the filmmaking. So like one of her first lines basically is the truth. Like she says something when they're storming in, but then afterward, you know, one of her people's coming up and it's like, you know, the prosecutor, the DA wants to know what happened. What should I tell them? And she just says the truth. So that's, you know, very little character building, but tells us a lot right there. And then the first shot that we see of her in the sort of the SWAT car, there's this like light shaft of just like, you are blessed, or like, you know, there's this feeling of like
purity.
And they were talking about in the making of that, you know, SWAT cars don't have huge openings like that because why would they?
It doesn't make any sense.
So they had to like, you know, build a special like, you know, carriage for them to be in specifically to get that shot and have that in there. And that's like just a great example of like elevated filmmaking. Like they knew that was important. Right. Like we're going to build a thing to get the shot because this is an important part of what the movie is about. I just love that.
That makes me so happy to hear.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, I mean, what I saw Denis Villeneuve do back in On Sunday, and what he also does here, is just he's so good at dealing with like really difficult material in a really just honest and like both, you know, just unflinching but kind of respectful way. Like if he's showing brutality, he's showing it for a reason, but also not for kind of like thrills. It's like that opening scene in the house is like a horror movie. I feel the dread and kind of the slow sickeningness of it. It's not kind of for fun. It's very much about just like you feel as sick to your stomach as the cops who are raiding the house. So I really respect how when he's engaging, especially in these kind of real world scenarios, not in a fantasy world, but just like engaging in the worst parts of our world. There's a level of respect he has as a filmmaker that I see throughout this movie. And he also has that kind of this lens of objectivity and trying to take in the reality of this complex scenario. And you never really feel any super strong judgment following any of the characters. And when you go to the border crossing area where they got all of the migrants are just gathered there, just they have humanity as well. They are shot with humanity. They're not just extras in the background. I just really love, I would love him to go back to do some more of these movies and engage with our real world. And because I love how he shoots it and how he respects it.
Well, and even the detail, I love when she tells, you know, Daniel Kaluuya, her partner, she's like, Reg, go outside. You know, it's okay. You don't have to be in here. And then he goes outside, but then in a few minutes we see that like everyone outside is puking, right?
Right.
That is what you're talking about. It's like everyone's humanity is here, right? We're all just, what we're seeing is so overwhelming. I feel like in a bad cop show, you know, they find this and then they're like, harder than ever. And they're like, let's get him.
Bum,
but this is
they cover their nose a little bit and then they're just like,
exactly.
well,
And they're like, whoa, what's going on
one
here?
Of these, huh?
Yeah, exactly. But no, I love it. It's like the weight of it, you feel it because of the way you see the characters reacting.
Yeah.
It's also realizing, as you were talking, Alex, that like, I feel like Villeneuve's filmography has gone from like completely bleak to like maybe somewhat hopeful. I haven't seen his first 3 movies, but like Encendies and Prisoners is just like really bleak. And then like Sicario is like, it's complicated. And Arrival's like, it's not great, but like there's maybe some hope. Maybe there's like some light at the end of the tunnel, and then like Blade Runner and Dune, or maybe just a little lighter in the theme. But it feels like he's lighter. Like, from there, like it feels like he's gone from from -10 to -1 or something. Like,
I mean, Dune is like about how your religion is all fake and just a tool for political power, engineered centuries before you were born.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah. And there's some real, and I think part of why I like Dune Part 1 is because it's before the total corruption of the religion, and so there's a little bit of like earnest spirituality in the Dune environment.
Right.
But I think Arrival to me, even though it's deeply sad, I think is his most optimistic and like loving movie. Because there is so much like hope even in the tragedy of the scenario at the end.
Spoilers, like general spoilers, but like Arrival and Blade Runner both have the sort of like the bad for the good kind of an ending, so it's like, oh, it's sad, but also like there's hope there with what we're left with.
Right. It's that bittersweet thing that makes the tears come.
Yeah. There's good in humanity in those movies, and there isn't always good in humanity on display.
There's not a whole lot of good in the humanity in Sicario.
Yeah. A sequence that I feel like we have to talk about, because I think it's probably the most like famous or notable aspect of this movie, is the border crossing scene, right? We're like coming back from Juarez into the US. And I feel like that scene kind of makes this like a little bit of like a dad movie. Like I feel like this was one of the movies that
this is such a dad movie,
right?
I'm pretty sure my dad like talks about this movie more than I do.
Yeah. No, like I came into like, I was visiting my parents once and my dad was watching and it's like, have you seen Sicario? And I was like, yes. Have you seen, you like Sicario? And it's like, oh, the border, right. Okay. Right. This is like an action scene.
Right.
And so a lot's, I think, been said about it, and it's done amazingly well the way it's shot. One of you, I think Brian brought a point of view, like the perspective, like we're with Emily Blunt's character for a lot of it. But what I was appreciating this time is that is like the end of a sequence, and its power comes from the buildup to it, which starts like 10 minutes earlier, right? So like you were saying, Trisha, we don't really know why they're going where they're going. They're not going where they said they were going. So like, we're not supposed to be here. Coming into the border, driving through the town, the warnings, the kind of cryptic warnings about like who you can trust and who you can't trust. The music has the dread of just like, oh my God, we're going across the border.
Mexico is very scary in this movie.
The bodies hanging from the bridge. I was like, really?
I've heard that like Juarez is not like, I think this movie portrays Juarez in an exaggerated
They had like
light.
crime scene tape around it, so the implication was like they are recent bodies. They haven't just been left hanging there like for a long time. But I'm still like, it's really.
So I was watching the extra features, and obviously they're trying to portray a story, but part of it was like what this was based on and the reality of the situation, and they just show some graphic images, and one of them is basically that.
So I'm sure all these things have happened.
No, I'm
it's
sure,
probably not a typical
not a
Saturday morning.
condensed and you step across the
on your
border
average day,
and
there's a lot of bodies just
on your way to
hanging
the
from
store.
bridges.
Yes. Yeah, it is unfortunate that is the only place we really get to see.
Mexico's a big country, and it's a great country.
Yeah.
It's not just this.
Yeah, that's anyway.
But it is doing narrative work. To your point, Michael.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah,
and it's engaging with horrific realities that also exist in our world. Yeah, it's not making it up.
And I think, as you pointed out, Trisha, with the way that the opening sequence really sets the, not just the thematic sort of makes some thematic points, but also just sets the tone of like this movie, this is gonna be this kind of movie. Like the border sequence is like, this is also gonna be this kind of movie. Like it's like, we're really taking it, so there's a whole lot of things going on, which, like you said, the tension and like the payoff feels like it was worth the tension. I think a lot of times filmmakers can do tension, and then the payoff is like, all right, why do we just spend 10 minutes for like that little little blip of a nothing? But yeah, just the POV, she's just like, what is happening? Like, I have no context for what is happening, as opposed to the opening sequence where she's like, it's not just like another day at the office, but it's kind of another day at the office. It's an elevated day at the office for her in the opening. But here it's just like, I have no idea what's going on, you know, and that really just like, that just kind of sets the tone for the movie to be like, anything might happen in this movie. And it just like really pulls you in.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sequence really brings out the No Country for Old Men-ness of this movie for me, because there's like a formalism to it all. Like it's, you know, because we don't have any information, it's just kind of, now we're like in pure cinema mode. So we don't know anything. And so now we're just like watching sound and images unfold, and we're trying to piece together like what did this sequence of images mean? Like what's happening? And I think, you know, there's the Roger Deakins of it all, where it's just every shot and, you know, the sound design, everything's just turned up to 11 as far as just like quality and care. So you feel like it's okay to just watch things happen for long periods of time in this movie, because you're in such good hands, and because the movie is just like formally exquisite and, you know, perfectly done. And you know, I love the way they capture the big sky, Arizona, Texas thing. You know, I grew up in Arizona, and like those, you know, sunset shots are the way it feels in that desert environment. And even capturing the bland blahness of, you know, the apartments in Arizona and the houses. It just like, even that all felt so authentic. And I love that you have Roger Deakins going into these just really unappealing environments and just still shooting them in this really like evocative way. And yeah, anyway, so this sequence and the whole movie really feels like it's operating in the same, it's aiming for the same kind of movie as No Country is, where it's like theme first, and on this journey we're going to be light on exposition, light on dialogue, and really just like make you lean forward, because the formal presentation is so carefully crafted.
And there's a couple great mini reversals in the Juarez sequence too, where like, I keep thinking about the spotter car, right, where she can see the taxi like going along, and then it disappears, and you're like, wow, no, the taxi, I like knew what that was, like I was understanding that. And then even where they like wave them through the gate, right? So they're like actually on the other side of the border. Technically, they're like through the gate, but then there's a stalled car. So no, everyone has stopped. So you get the like relief of like, oh, we made it through. They just waved us through. But now like everything's messed up. And then too, like even in the sequence, the, you know, the good guys, the CIA, but like they get out of the car and they get out of their cars and they're like pointing all their guns, you know, at the cartel guys. And then for a minute you think maybe no one's gonna get shot and die, right? So there's these breaths of like hope, or like it starts to go one way for just like a second before it goes bad again. And that's the stuff that like great tension and great action sequences are made of, where you think that it's gonna, you know, there's a potential for it to like not explode into violence or not go the one way that it goes, or just little quick little reversals or left turns, and they work really well.
And the fact that when the violence does explode, it's just so shockingly fast, you know,
Yes.
like that's also part of the No Country feeling of you don't get the Hollywood action version of this. You get the realistic, there's 6 guns pointing at this car. If they all fire right now, everybody is dead in 1 second. It's over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and one of the making up things they were talking about, like for the Emily Blunt character, obviously it's, you know, it's the disorientation of what are we doing here? Like we're not allowed to do this, and also that she has to fire her gun, and her role is such that like every bullet she fires, she has to account for later.
Right.
And like that's not in the text of this, but like you feel that, and like this movie cares enough to know that like every bullet that gets fired matters and is part of like this web, this political web that is all of this is kind of playing against.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had better context for what is legal / right in this movie, you know, and in terms of just the actual text of it all. I'm also particularly bad at like following kind of political weavy stuff, but this movie is also just not a movie that is going to sort of look at you and tell you like, this is what this means over here and this is what it means over here. But at the same time, as you were just saying, like, she tells me, right? Like Kate tells me this thing is not okay over here. So like, so you don't need to know what it is. You just need to know that I don't like it, but they're going to do it. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But I definitely found myself being like, I don't know what it means when someone says we're going to do X or whatever. I'm like, okay, but I need to know what X means. I don't need it, but I wouldn't mind it. Put it that way.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting. You mentioned the big sky thing a second ago, Alex, and there are some really incredible wide shots in this, like really wide shots. And even the scene where she's right after the Juarez sequence where she's confronting Josh Brolin and she's telling him like that was illegal. It's from this huge wide shot, right? And are they at the like detention area where like all the immigrants are seated there, or they're not there yet?
Yeah. I think they're just kind of safely back at a military base.
Right. But it is a great big wide shot where it's not actually like a close-up on them or their faces or lines. They're really just in silhouette. And, the movie utilizes a lot of sort of like low light stuff with like sky, dawn, and dusk. And that's very Villeneuve. But like, and just very trendy at the time, right? That is No Country for Old Men also, to an extent. But I love it here because it feels thematic, right? Where like the twilight sort of like dawn and dusk, and then there's like clouds and stuff. I don't know how much of this was sky replacement. It's gorgeous.
There are a lot of visual effects in this, and this is one of the movies that's regarded as like, wait, what? There's visual effects? That's like, yeah, CGI can be good.
Yes.
Right.
It's really gorgeous, but it's doing thematic work, right? Where it's like, it's this sort of like murky twilight. We don't know what's day. We don't know what's night. We don't know what's right and wrong. We don't know anything really. It's hard to see stuff.
Yeah,
but it's doing thematic work in this movie. And even just the largeness of the frame around her, right? Things are so much bigger than she is.
Right.
Like we want to be close to her. We want to feel her feelings, but everything is so much bigger than her and beyond her. Everybody's plotting. And it's direction. This is like what direction is for. Like it's so well done.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned we can't see anything. Do we want to talk about the tunnel? Like the rate, or you just say something else, Michael?
Well, I want to talk about the good cinematography for just a moment more.
Okay, cool, yeah. We'll get to this.
Where like again in the making of Denis Villeneuve has a line where he's talking about like, he's honored to be working with Roger Deakins, and like, what do you do when you have the master? And he was like, yeah, the only way to like kind of work with a master is to like flirt with disaster, basically, and like challenge them to do something that's like outside of the comfort zone or outside of what's easy. And so I like, some of my favorite cinematography is in these like really boring spaces, like the conference room where Emily Blunt is getting briefed and debriefed about what's going on. Like, it's just a conference room, but like the framing, Alex and I were talking about this, the framing is just like impeccable. Like there's just no better framing. Like you couldn't move it a pixel up or down or left or right. Like it's just doing the framing. The lines are drawing your eyes exactly where they're supposed to be, where the people are over her shoulder. Like there's just like really good cinematography happening in a way that is like totally different from like the Blade Runner 2049, where it can be flashy and showy and look, we made it orange. Like that's cool. Mm-hmm. But like when you can't do that, when it's someone in a conference room talking to three people sitting, what do you do? And I love this movie to study like from that perspective. Like what does Roger Deakins do when those are the constraints? Mm-hmm. At the end of the movie, we go a different direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before we switch over, I'll just say real quick that like, that's what I mentioned earlier. And I think like Ridley Scott's actually, or at least used to be good at this. I don't know lately, but it's like at being like, I'm making this kind of movie, so I'm not going to make it the way I make those other kinds of movies, you know, and just kind of knowing when to have that restraint. And there's showy all the time, like a Blade Runner or a Dune or whatever, which is basically trying to like what it should be for that movie. And then there's like boring. And then there's what you're talking about, Michael, which is just like, we're not going to be showy, but we're also going to be really smart and careful about this so that the people who look at these shots are actually going to care and be impressed. The people who don't want to be distracted are not going to be distracted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That conference room shot Michael's referring to, it's a shot behind Emily Blunt looking at, I think it's like 4 men, 3 on her left, 1 on her right. The one on her right is Josh Brolin. And just,
it's 3. It's 2 on one side and then 1 on the other, because it creates a pretty triangle. Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, when he showed me that frame, I was just like, why does that frame just feel so good? It's just like the position of the people, her silhouette in the foreground, like the lines of the table and all the glass are just like exactly right. And that's where it's just, there's something special where you can watch a TV show that has the same kind of conference room scene and it won't feel special in that same way. And well, that's not the shot, Michael.
Sorry, anyway. I know. I'm sending that to people. I sent the wrong shot.
But okay, getting away from the great shots. I mean, there's definitely an intentionality behind that nighttime raid. They know what they're doing, and I do love. Speaking of like thematic shots, I do love the shot with the sunset and all the SWAT, whatever, special ops guys in silhouette, literally descending into darkness, like disappearing into just a black void of the landscape. So cool. And then this is part of where I think I kind of fell off in the theater the first time I saw the movie. It was just, there was something happening where I get that there's a thematic cool idea of like this hyper realism of we're only seeing kind of from the perspective of their night vision goggles or various types of lenses. We're not going to have any artificial lighting or any fake moonlight to help you see what's happening. But it felt like it overstayed its welcome to me, and whatever kind of thematic formal experiment it was doing, we could have had like a few shots of that. And now we're into the tunnel that has, some lights in the ceiling. What do you guys make of that sequence and its length and the way it kind of draws out the darkness?
I also remember being very distracted by it in the theater. It worked a lot better for me this time. I think it's almost easier to see on a not huge screen when it's,
I was watching during the day, unfortunately, so it was still not easy to see on my screen.
Yeah.
What bothered me, I don't know if it's more, but what also bothered me is that it's switching between different modes of seeing in pure black. Where
I think it's like 3. It's like night green, night vision,
infrared, and
then sort of normal, just night photography.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so that was almost the more distracting thing for me this time, of like, I wish you had at least like chosen one. And like the infrared I thought was cool and like distorted people as a what does this mean? The night vision was a little too like with the vignette on it, which was part of their storyboards too. Like they were going for like, it's the vignette, you're seeing it. That really pulled me out of it anytime that was happening. Also, I feel like I couldn't see any better with it on. It was weird.
Right.
Yeah, I couldn't see anything with the night vision.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like it was the opposite for me, the switching between the different ones, because I felt like there was the right amount of being like, we're going to switch to kind of normal night photography for a second to kind of give you a break, show you the geography of the space, see what's going on, and then we're going to go back into kind of stylized stuff. So I think that like, just like film watcher in me thought it was cool, just like, I like this, it's cool, stylized, we're having fun. But then also it's like, obviously it's doing a POV thing where you're feeling lost and not able to see things. And then it's doing thematic stuff of like, yeah, like you said, Alex, we're literally descending into darkness now. Things should feel off and wrong, right? And yeah, I don't know. I'd have to watch it again to see if I thought it overstayed its welcome. But I feel like all those things clicked for me in that moment where I feel like it had that sort of like, yeah, this is what I'm watching this movie for. I'm waiting for like one of these cool sequences. So yeah, thumbs up for me.
I'll say a couple things. The first is that if you're an action writer, making your sequences visually distinct is generally a good thing. And so having this like really narrow space, this tunnel, and we've talked before about how when you near like the climax of a movie, putting pressure on your protagonist and narrowing them into sometimes physically a narrower space can be the right call, right? Like, I almost wish that more of it had happened in that tunnel with her, like, because she's kind of hanging back and not a lot of it is like happening with her. Like, if she had somehow something had happened and she'd ended up nearer to the front or like more in the thick of what's going on, I think that would have been potentially really interesting. The cinematography itself is a little gimmicky. That's how it felt to me. It's just like, I feel like they were trying some stuff. And like, again, you're trying to make it visually distinct. Have you read the screenplay, Michael?
I have not.
Interesting. I would be curious to hear from someone if the night vision or infrared or whatever is indicated in the script, or if it was strictly a directorial choice. Because it has a Taylor Sheridan vibe to me, that I wonder if it maybe originated with him. But I think, again, it's not necessarily the wrong call, but it is a long sequence. And I do kind of lose her in it. And I feel like since she is about to exit as the protagonist in some ways for like a brief section of the movie, you do want to stay with her in this scene, right? You're trying to like, again, feel her crisis arriving of like, what am I going to do in this situation? And she does have a climactic choice, right? She points her gun after they come out of the tunnel and she sees Alejandro is going to abduct this driver, Silvio. She points her gun at him and is like, you're not going to do this. I know what's going on now. He shoots her in the vest, but like, it's still, that is a climax for the character or a crisis for the character. And so I kind of wish she wasn't getting lost in that sequence quite so much. Michael, you found it.
They move out. We watch the world through night vision goggles.
I see.
There are a lot of things that are also very different in the screenplay. It's fascinating.
I was going to bet $10. I'm glad I didn't lose my $10 that I didn't bet.
I've heard that Benicio del Toro's character has a lot more dialogue or is a lot more chatty.
That's what I'm seeing.
And
here,
they stripped out a lot of that. So I think there's a lot of good directorial calls, I think, in the adaptation of the screenplay.
I think so. Yeah. I think if this is your debut screenplay, no matter who you are, and Denis Villeneuve picks it up and decides to direct it, you are a lucky son of a gun.
Yes. You're very lucky.
Although based on Usual Suspects, it might be Benicio, who was like, 80% of my lines don't matter, so I don't need to say them.
Yeah, I think he's probably part of that too.
Yeah.
Sure.
Just to go off what Trisha was saying, I think that would have solved the sequence for me if all of the quote unquote gimmickiness of the night vision goggles were clearly from her perspective, or clearly she's going on an arc throughout the sequence, and that's part of it, the disorientation and the, oh my God, I don't even know where I am, what's happening. Kind of like Silence of the Lambs, that finale. I think that would have made it all feel worth it to me. But I think, I don't know whose eyes I'm looking through most of the time in those POV shots. And there's enough of them that I start to be like, well, what is this for? Is it about her anymore? Or is it about just, it's cool to see stuff in night vision?
I do want to say, speaking of POV, that you guys mentioned that most of the time we are firmly in her POV for this movie. And then leaving it following the sequence in the tunnel feels a little jarring. But we're actually not with her the whole time up until that point. There's the torture room sequence, which I think is really interesting, that she's not in at all. And then there's the other scene where they like pull that guy out of her apartment, and then they like beat him up in the back of the car or whatever and threaten him and stuff to get the information. There are scenes from Josh Brolin and I'm sorry, I don't remember his character's name.
Alejandro.
No.
Matt.
Matt. Josh Brolin's name. Sorry, I know Alejandro. I know Benicio del Toro's name, but like,
well, and then there's the whole Silvio sequence where
I can't wait to talk about Silvio. Yeah, that too. So, but yeah, there are scenes, and not an insignificant number of them in this movie that are not from her POV, both with the characters in the US and of course with Silvio.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about Silvio. I feel like that's, you guys talk. I want to see if it's in the script actually.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, is that subplot
That
even
is an
in the
interesting
script?
idea.
Yeah.
Okay, it's here. I'm seeing it. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right, Taylor Sheridan.
All right.
you get points for that. Yeah, well, this is my lesson for the movies. So, but we have to talk about it. So whatever. But yeah, I think that B plot or C plot or whatever you call that kind of, parallel train track we're on with the cop in Mexico and his family is like the key to the movie. I think the movie would not work for me, and the whole finale would not work for me without that parallel track. And I think it's so smart because, as soon as there's a point in the movie where you can start to feel like, okay, you know what? Sorry, Kate, world's tough. CIA's got to do what CIA's got to do. You got to take out the bad guys. This is how it is. And maybe it's kind of, Alejandro's kind of cool and how good he is at his job and stuff. And you need the humanity of just the people who are collateral damage. You need to establish that humanity to leave us in that kind of sickening place of there's no good outcome here. There's no solution to this problem that doesn't result in just innocent people getting hurt. So I think it's such a requirement for this movie to work the way it does. I'm so happy it's in there.
Yeah. This movie would be like extremely offensive, really, like without that. And I think a lot of ways, and it's weird because there are sometimes when I'm watching movies, action movies where lots of people are dying, where I kind of imagine or desire like exactly this, like that random guard that just got shot in the background. I kind of want to know who, like, that was a person, that was murder that just happened. And I know this is cool and fun, but like, that's a person. And I think it's important to remember that people are people. And this movie does like exactly that. And like, it does it like really efficiently too. Like the moments are brief, so it doesn't feel like we're being pulled away. They're kind of also doing pacing things that let us reset at times, but it's also establishing this character, this life, this human, and that it's going to intersect at some point, and it's probably not going to be good, like as it's going along. And I'd be curious if just like you put this in any movie where like any background person died, like what that would do. I feel like Austin Powers does something.
I was going to say, didn't we talk about this in our Austin Powers episode?
Yeah. It's a gag in Austin Powers, but it's identifying that real feeling you have, Michael, which is just like, these are all people. Oh my God, they have lives.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting because the movie, like, in no way tells you it's setting up for anything really. As far as I can remember, at least, like, it's just like, here's a person and we're going to come back and check on him once in a while. We kind of have a vague idea of what his job is, or not a vague idea. We know what his job is, and but we don't really know what's going to happen. And then it's like, oh, he's corrupt, and then he dies. It's just like, but in a way, like, that's so effective. And then of course his kids are used in that sort of like very thematic final sequence, to kind of pay that off. But yeah, like there's something, I don't know, like the uneven, there's just an unevenness of the POV in this movie that I think, like, I went through, as you were saying, Trisha, like there are these other sequences, but I'm just like, I feel like I wish that there was, like, I understood what I feel like. I wish it was more omniscient or less omniscient, or something, so that when it switched, like, there's a shot of Manuel, the one like drug lord guy, like in his house, his like kids are in the pool and he's playing with one of those colored bracelets or whatever. Mm-hmm. And like the shot is 10 seconds long, and that's the only time we're ever in like that character's POV. You know what I mean? There's something about it where I wish it was more like it was telling me that we're like actually switching now, because then like you could make the Benicio. We'll get into this in lessons because my lesson's all about POV. But the Silvio POV is the one where the movie is sort of like broadcasting, like, we are doing something different right now that feels very different than like, oh, we're over in the interrogation room while Emily Blunt's in the other room or something. And yeah, it's really affecting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting that they kind of have to bend over backwards with some of the other departures that you're talking about to like make it relevant to her arc, where she's like, oh, and he just gave up. He just told you where it was, right? And they just like lie to her about it, but we know they tortured the guy, right? It's kind of like they're trying to make it part of her arc where she like kind of knows he was tortured and has like accepted that in order to get to the bad guy or whatever. But I don't know. There are times where I can feel it straining to like include these events that are not from her POV into the arc of the movie, right? Or like into the arc of the character. Because like in something like, and I know we keep comparing it to No Country for Old Men, but in something like that, every time something occurs, the Tommy Lee Jones character, who is the one that has the character arc in that movie, is directly like there cleaning it up. Like he's receiving the information. He knows what's going on. So they can all reasonably become beats along his arc rather than just the arc of what we're being shown.
Right. Yeah, I had this, like, not to sidetrack too much, but now that we're talking about it, like, I had this thought. I actually went through and marked every time it wasn't from Kate's POV. And I just had this thought where I was like, what if those moments were from her POV, as many of them as could be, not Silvio, obviously, or the Benicio finale, but like the conference room scene. We're in the conference room and they're talking about Kate and Daniel Kaluuya, whose name is Reggie. Yeah. I love that they were like, we need 2 salt of the earth, like American FBI agents. We're getting Emily Blunt and Daniel Kaluuya.
Super British people.
Yeah. But then we go to her coming in, you know, and I was just like, what if that was them sitting outside waiting and we can see through the glass, because we can see through the glass, and we see them kind of pointing and making faces or whatever, and we don't know exactly what they're saying, but we know they're talking about them, and that kind of could pull us in but still be in her POV. What if the interrogation room sequence, she just saw Benicio like walking down the hall with the water cooler thing and then walking into a room, and like as the, you know, Godfather, like the door opens, we see a guy in a chair, the door closes, and we never see what goes on. And they're like, I just thought there was so many ways they could use POV all from her perspective to make us feel even more like we're out of the loop, but we have just enough context of what's going in. And then the Silvio stuff and or the Benicio switch could feel like a bigger, like this is the first time we're doing this switch, as opposed to these kind of mini little detours, and then these kind of medium detours with Silvio, and then this big detour with Benicio. I think that's the unevenness of it, which in some ways can be exciting, but in other ways just makes me feel like I think there was like another way that it could have been done.
Yeah. No, yeah, I definitely feel what you're talking about. And we've been talking about all the great ways that the filmmaking, directing, cinematography, and performances I'm going to talk about like elevate this story. And I'm so impressed by that, I guess. Like, I think it's cool to have artifacts like this movie. And I think Arrival kind of fits into this category. You know, I made a video about Arrival for Lessons from the Screenplay and did like a deep dive into the screenplay, and what's the final version of it was very different than the screenplay, was very different than earlier versions of the screenplay. And the screenwriter talked a lot about that revision process and how much had to get done in the editing to kind of make that like movie work. And so I think it's interesting that there are maybe a couple examples here of Denis Villeneuve taking screenplays with really cool thematic ideas and really great content that maybe aren't like bulletproof or like totally, you know, tight and perfect, but bringing in these amazing collaborators and like making the hell out of the movie. And sometimes that takes reordering the story and rewriting the story afterward. But I feel like that is such a great thing to look at and learn and see like what can good directing, good filmmaking do and bring to the table. And yeah, this is such a great example of that. And the performances, I think, again, are a huge part. Again, in the making of, he talks a lot about how important the casting process was for this, because there aren't a lot of lines. So you need people that can convey a lot with just a look and just a glance, or with their body language, how they carry themselves. And I feel like you really feel that in this movie. Like there's not a lot of conversation, but I do feel like a relationship arc happening between Benicio del Toro and Emily Blunt's character. Like there is this sort of like weird, deep caring, but like tension that's there, but it's like so little of it is in the dialogue. And he even says, Denis Villeneuve, like Josh Brolin's character, like truly they were struggling because he's kind of goofy as written on paper and like could have been done really poorly. And he was sort of like, it's not on the page. We need to bring in an artist that's going to make this a thing. And so you cast Josh Brolin and you get this amazing character. So yeah, just this whole movie, obviously like the bones of it, the soul of it are in the script, and that is the story that's being told. But it's also such a great thing to study, to see like what can good filmmaking do? Like how high can it improve on something that's already good this much? And I just think that's super cool that we have this. Brian and Alex, we've already started to talk about your lessons. We want to skip here and come back to Brian. We were talking about POV.
Sure, yeah. I'll just kind of finish the rest of my thought about POV. Also, my other lesson is if John Bernthal comes up to you at a bar, go on IMDb and look at his filmography. It's not going to turn out well. Like, I knew it wasn't going to go well. Yeah. Why didn't she?
Really quick before I forget, just because I thought this was cute. I listened to the Roger Deakins podcast occasionally. They had Daniel Kaluuya on talking about being on set on Sicario, and that was kind of his first big movie, and it happened pretty like suddenly, where he was like fighting for like tiny little roles and stuff, and then suddenly he's on set with Benicio del Toro and Emily Blunt and Josh Brolin with Denis Villeneuve, and he said he was absolutely terrified but learned a ton. And it's just fun to think about like where he's gone, but like thinking about little Daniel Kaluuya. Yeah, this is before Get Out.
Yeah, he's great in this.
He was retroactively put into this movie for my second viewing because he definitely wasn't there the first time because I didn't know who that guy was. And they're what I like to call pre-cameos when I go back and watch a movie and be like, oh, this person just had like a smaller, it's not a small role in this movie, but no, it just great example of a movie where POV is used not just for control of information, but also to make you feel emotion, which is, a movie like Memento, we've talked about a ton of just like, how do you put, audience in the character's headspace. But I just think this is a really good example of it because of everything it does, which is almost why it's frustrating for me when I'm like, do it even more then, we talked about, I think Trisha said, like, what if the raid at the end was all from her, like through her night vision or something. So we only get what she sees, because that's what it feels like. The guy who shoots at her in the beginning, and then most importantly, the guy who shoots at her on the border crossing, it's like we don't see that guy until she sees that guy, right? So it's like we don't see. There's a totally normal way of doing that where she's looking this way and we see him creep up behind and everything, and that's totally fine. That's not like bad filmmaking. That's just not the thing that this movie is interested in doing, which is saying like, looks in the mirror, see a guy, and then it happens, right? And then Benicio, saving her in the apartment and stuff. Like we don't see he's there until she sees he's there, and I just feel that's really affecting. Which again is why I'm just like, what if she just saw the water jug going in, and that's all we get, right?
I really like that version of that
pitch,
sequence. Yeah. I want to see that.
And then the Benicio switch is interesting because I was like, how do you do, and this is switching gears a little bit, like how do you do the Benicio finale well? And I feel like this is the only way you can do it. It's like we need enough backstory to know this guy really wants revenge and we're going to go see it. But like we can't care more about him because he's going to go like kill some kids, right? So it's like we can't be with him, like we can't like see a flashback of his backstory and then be kind of checking in with him throughout the movie, because then he's not scary anymore, and then that finale feels like, oh no, but I liked you or whatever. It's like he needs to kind of be a guy we don't spend enough time with to really know who he is, other than like in the scary interrogation scenes. Also I pictured the John Bernthal interrogation scene where she's watching from another car and just kind of like in her like I just went through a trauma thing, but then she sees just enough of like through like 2 windows of like what's going on. You know what I mean? Like there's anyway. But what was I saying? So the Benicio thing, it's like it's kind of just right to be like, we're gonna watch this character who we don't know anything about, but we know just enough about, go do this thing that is kind of triumphant and also kind of horrible. And then that's going to give you that final standoff between him and Kate at the end. So I do think that POV switch is really cool. And kind of like, it's like, we're going to like let you ride the Benicio ride for like 10 minutes. I'm never going to say that again. But if we did more or less POV, it might not feel right for that moment. So I think this is a really interesting movie to study for POV, both in the ways in which it's frustrating, but also in the ways in where it's really triumphant.
Yeah. Yeah. I do like you're calling out with the Alejandro character. It is like somehow like rendered exactly in the right zone where like I care about him and I want him to do good enough, but also I'm like, but you're like a monster and you're bad. Like it's exactly in this like perfect zone,
right.
And it's pretty impressive that they pull that off. Yeah,
I'll piggyback off of that because the thing that I didn't say about the Silvio parallel storyline, the cop, is how he kind of transitions us into that sequence. You know, he is another character whose POV we have had access to throughout the movie. And the switcheroo happens that we're talking about when basically him and Emily Blunt come into contact in the movie. And in that moment when all 3 characters are together in that room and Alejandro shoots her and then takes off with the cop, like that sequence that follows, I care about so much because of Silvio. Like it's stressful to be in that car with a gun pointed at the head. If that was just random cop number 2, that scene would be totally different, I think. It'd just be like, hey, random cop, you're a red shirt, you're gonna die, sure, whatever. That's, you know, I'm already braced for your death. I don't care. So I'm just kind of now numbed to this scenario and we'll just let it play out. In this case, I'm like, oh no, like I don't want you to die. Like you're helping with the drugs, but probably like you have to. And you know, it's like you have a sweet kid who wants to play soccer with you. You are a very human, 3-dimensional character. And so you being a pawn in this game is now horrifying, and I'm on the edge of my seat hoping you make it. And then when he doesn't make it, I think it's a really important kind of clarifying moment of, if you were on the Alejandro train of like, you know what, he's going to go be a badass and get revenge. It's like, oh, well, that doesn't feel good anymore. And then, doubling down on that with all the kids dying. So I just think, once again, going back to my lesson, like, the Silvio character is so vital for this movie to work, both in the total thematic arc and where it ends with that last shot of his son and wife and the gunshots in the background, but also for the sequence with Alejandro in Mexico at the end. I think I would actually kind of tune out a bit if it wasn't for Silvio being in the car with him. And just that sequence, once again, feels like a great Coen Brothers No Country sequence because of just the humanity of all the characters involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of Fargo. Also, I feel like the show
totally,
and
total
the
Fargo
both do
vibes.
things that, Trisha, what's your lesson?
Yeah, it's not. I guess it's not a subplot, but I think it's really important, the relationship between her and Reggie, and like sort of the function that it serves. Just again in terms of like giving her humanity. Emily Blunt is amazing in this movie. And she looks so young to me for some reason. Like she looks young. And in actuality, she was 32, which is young, but is not like, to me, she looks 25, right, in this movie. And I was just like, how are you doing any of this? And I think that's the point, right? She's supposed to be green. She's supposed to be in some ways idealistic, and naive. And so like, just the way she's styled, and again, the way that she's portrayed, like,
and she plays it so quiet, like so understated. Such a really cool performance. Totally.
And yet another mini lesson of, if you want to make a character more interesting, just make it a woman. Because it does, right? In a profession like this, it tells you a lot about what that woman has had to sacrifice to get there. because in our world, we know that it's not easy for women to get into that conference room. And it's interesting, you know, there is like definitely a Silence of the Lambs thing where like they're hanging something of a lantern on the sexism of it all at the outset. And it's kind of brought up, you know, and again, like this is kind of what my lesson is, where like the femaleness of the character feels like accurately lived in the context of our world, right? That there's like sort of a sexual framework around the violence that like around the attempt on her life, that she can't do her job without being criticized for it or like being looked down for it. And it feels well observed. It's not this like girl power version of feminism,
right.
Where everyone's just like, wow, you're amazing at your job. And yet a woman, so much power. Like it's not that at all. All that being said, I love the relationship between her and the Daniel Kaluuya character because, right, he is able in brief stretches of dialogue to give us some of the backstory, right? She mentions to the Josh Brolin character that she's divorced and she doesn't have kids. So we get that bit of exposition at the outset. But then we get this like comfort that they have in talking about their relationships, right? Like, she's like, you know, this is going on with, he knows the name of her ex-husband and like kinda, we get the hint that he knows the whole story of what happened. And then the one like sneaky thing the movie does is make the hitman character that she meets in the bar a friend of his. And you're like, oh, well, maybe he's okay then. Because the minute he's looking at her in the bar, I'm like, girl, no. Do not. This is like, he's not looking at you for any good reason. You just went in the bank when we told you not to go in the bank, you dummy.
Right.
And like, but he knows Reggie, like, so maybe he is just like into it. Who wouldn't be? It's Emily Blunt. Like, okay. And then, you know, we kind of like want her to be happy. Like we want her to be able to be a person and have like a brief moment for herself, like in all of this. And again, like even the fact that they're in that bar, right? It's her suggestion. She's like, is there somewhere we can go? Like, I need a drink. Let's go get a drink. All of that is like what a normal person would be. And in another version of this movie, it's either not done at all, where again, she has like her armor fully on and is like made of steel and nothing shakes this woman ever. That's a bad version of this movie. Another bad version of this movie is like a dumber version of this, right? Where she's more gullible or she's like, you know, even less capable or whatever it is. Like, I feel like this is a well-drawn female character with humanity, but also not making her a man. Like, she is who she is in this world, and it works because of Emily Blunt bringing even more nuance to it than is there.
Yeah, she, to your point about well observed, she talked about like she got to meet with several women that like had similar jobs and got to
really
like
interesting.
Hear what their perspective was, and said she even kind of based it off one in particular who was like really shy, like as a person, but had to be like strong in these scenarios. And I feel like that three-dimensionality comes through. And also just like she's the only woman in the movie, basically. And like she's also the only one like fighting for good. Like there's thematic, like
yes,
just that contrast helps like focus us in terms of like who represents what and
well,
all that happening.
Absolutely. And yeah, as a reminder, it's not to say that like real women in reality can't be a wide variety of things, can't be everything. But because we live in the timeline that we live in, like there are traditionally masculine values, like a version of toxic masculinity that values this kind of thing. And then there are traditionally feminine values that has this kind of value system. And so like we talked about it with Avatar, with like a male myth of like domination and conquering and like violence and these things. And then a female myth, right? Like, and what that looks like in terms of community and nurturing and like that's archetypal. And so if you're kind of tapping into like someone who stands for rightness, not always, because again, real women can be anything, but it makes sense to put a woman into this world to represent a thing.
Yeah. there's a line even that like Daniel Kaluuya has when he's sort of saying like, you look terrible, things are off, like, and he's like commenting on her looks and saying like, you used to be like first round draft pick or something like that. And like, I feel like the way that's like, there's so many bad ways to do that, but like something about the way that is handled, both the language that he uses, but the performance, there's like respect there. It feels believable of like, I believe that this is a man and a woman in our reality, but also I believe that there's like a meaningful relationship here. And I think that's, this movie is, like you're saying, is full of well-observed moments that could have been done very differently.
Yes.
Could have been real bad.
Real bad.
Denis Villeneuve, good.
Yes.
Quick reminder before we go to what we're watching. Next week, we'll be back with Challengers. Very excited to talk about that movie. I guess I should probably watch it again.
Should definitely watch it again.
Watch it again.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, that's gonna be an interesting conversation, I think.
I think so.
Yeah. Anyway, what else have you guys been watching? Brian, what have you been watching recently?
Well, in the vein of Sicario, if you like movies about civil unrest, I have a pair of 2024 movies for you. I'm Still Here, which is about Brazil in the 1970s, was just directed by Walter Salles, was just nominated for Best Picture. And The Seed of the Sacred Fig, about Iran right now, directed by Mohammad Rasulov, and was nominated, I think, for Best Foreign Film. And weirdly, they're both about a domestic family whose father is embroiled in the political unrest of the time and how it affects the rest of the family. And I'm Still Here, the father is a victim of the oppressive government, like he is dealing with them from that standpoint. But in The Seed of the Sacred Fig, the father is actually part of the government, and his daughters are part of the protest, and his wife is trying to like figure out how to navigate it all, and it's like really, really enthralling. That they're both great, but that one, Seed of the Sacred Fig, just like really got to me. And again, it's about things that are happening right now. The director was sentenced to 8 years in prison by the Iranian government for essentially making a movie about what was happening. And he's kind of been like for years bobbing and weaving and like making movies in secret and to kind of like show what's going on, and then like sometimes being imprisoned for it. Really crazy, but he got a lovely movie out of it, which is great, that I highly recommend. And I'm Still Here is a little bit more of a movie that you're going to go like, oh yeah, this is kind of a standard biopic about a real person and stuff, but also just really well done.
Nice.
Cool. Okay. Alex, what have you been watching?
Speaking of Oscar contenders, I watched one that we are not covering this season, which is Conclave. And it's so interesting. Every year we kind of talk about these slots, in the Best Picture category. Like there's just different movies that fill different slots. There's like the indie darling, the very classical, maybe epic, the brutalist, maybe is that this year. And this feels
the blockbuster.
We had Dune Part 2,
right?
But this year there's also a slot for just like very highly prestige-y, just kind of showy but small, not big movie, but just like this movie was only made because of Oscar season, basically. That movie.
The actors movie.
Yeah, it's just
right.
it's like here's a bunch of great actors getting to like just really like chew the scenery and be actory actors with like really gorgeous, like kind of over the top gorgeous like costumes and sets and cinematography. And it just kind of exists because the Oscars exist. And if you go into it with that mindset, it's a really kind of fun experience. A lot of people have said, online kind of like film, social media has kind of just said it's like a surprisingly just like high school gossipy kind of feeling movie. It's about the Vatican trying to choose the new pope, but it's just so like, all these priests are kind of like it is kind of like a high school popularity contest, backstabbing, yada yada, but it's shot in that Oscar like highbrow way with the highbrow music and the real juicy performances. So all this to say, Conclave is an Oscar movie, and I enjoyed it.
Nice. Okay. Trisha, what have you been watching?
I'm going a different direction. I did not see a recent movie. I mean, I have seen a few, but the one I'm going to talk about today is a little film from 1982 called First Blood. To my shock, not called Rambo First Blood, although that it is the first Rambo movie.
When you said First Blood, I was like, surely she doesn't mean Rambo. But apparently
I surely do mean
right.
Rambo. I had not ever actually seen any Rambo movies up until I decided to sit down and watch this one.
Rambo.
I was writing a movie recently that has some shared DNA with First Blood, and not much, I will say. Somebody was like, this sounds like Rambo. I was like, I don't think so. But I guess I better check. Turns out I was right. It doesn't actually have much to do with Rambo, but I was very curious. And you know what? I had a great time. It's more of a drama than I expected it to be. Like, actually, the whole, like, first act of it is sort of a, drama about a Vietnam veteran who has PTSD and doesn't do very many action-y things for a while until he decides to run away into the forest. And then, like, yeah, it's kind of what you expect from that point on. But in that, like, early 80s way that feels like it's still pretty 70s. So it is a little bit less slick than you think. Like, it's actually very rough around the edges and, still very much an anti-war movie. I really dug it. So it was maybe I'll sit down and watch the other Rambo movies. I don't know. But I was happy to have replaced this missing part of my filmography.
Nice.
First Blood from 1982.
Nice.
I love that the second one's apparently called Rambo First Blood Part 2. It seems a bit much. Maybe we could have thought of another blood-related title that wasn't First Blood.
The third one is called Rambo Second Blood Part 1.
I think you're joking, but I don't know.
Who knows?
The way these are titled, I'm all off my game.
Yeah, as you were saying it, I was like, I should watch Rambo, and I was like, wait, I think I have seen Rambo. As you were talking about it, I think in film school we watched it, so I think I watched it many a year ago.
There you go.
But I think I liked it too.
Yeah,
nice. I recently watched Black Doves on Netflix.
Ooh.
So Black Doves is a British spy thriller with Keira Knightley and Ben Whishaw, and like Keira Knightley is like an undercover spy who's like has a secret life, married to an important political figure, and then like spy stuff happens, but like she's having an affair, and then that guy dies, and so now there's like spy things happening in London, and Ben Whishaw is Paddington as an assassin, and like you love him as much as you would love like Paddington, and so the tone of it is interesting, and I can't quite describe it. It's like a little playful, a little goofy, but like not at this, but like it maintains its like stakes. Like I'm always really invested in the characters and the goings on of them, even if like the world itself is a little like this doesn't quite make sense, or like you guys are saying assassins a lot in a way that like I don't know that real assassins would say.
The real assassins are talking about being assassins.
So it's like in this really weird zone, but I love spy thrillers, and I like had such a like blast watching this. It was just really fun. Ended up deeply caring about the characters and their relationships, and it was really fun. So I recommend it. Black Doves on Netflix.
And it's only 6 episodes, so it doesn't drag out. It's just 6 episodes.
It's not a movie? He said it was a thriller, and I thought it was a movie.
No, it's a series.
Yeah.
Damn it. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a first season or a limited series?
It's a first season.
First season, okay.
Yeah. But it's one of those that like it could have ended and like it's fine. Like it tells its story, it does its thing.
Sure.
Arcs coming.
So it's only 6 hours of my life then.
Correct.
Yeah.
So far.
Watch Penguin if you only have time for one of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Penguin is genuinely still my favorite show of the year.
Refuse to believe that's true.
I don't like superhero movies anymore, and I love the Penguin.
I guess I'm looking forward to being wrong. I just like can't wrap my mind around it. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense.
You thought it was a new season, but it's not. So we're still talking about Penguin.
I'm almost feeling like we need to temper expectations now a little bit.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
It's like, because not like it's a perfect, like the best thing ever, but it's
Penguin medium.
really good.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
very solid.
Gotcha.
And probably because I expected nothing, that's part of why I'm so raving about it.
Yeah, it's very well done. Awesome. Okay, well, this has been our conversation about Sicario. We want to say a big thank you, as always, to the patrons that make this show possible. If you want to help us make more episodes and get access to our patron exclusive episodes this season, which include Wicked, Network, and Chicago, head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. We want to say thank you to our producer, Vince Major. Thank you to our editor, Mike Wuerth, and the whole Nebula Studios team. I'm Michael Tucker. I'm joined today by Trisha Rand, Brian Bittner, and Alex Galleros, and we will see you in our next episode for Challengers.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.